Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into something pretty fascinating, a single text called Time Erosion, the last thread.
That's right. And it's not like a scientific paper. It reads more like a chronicle, almost
Hmm.
a story, about this phenomenon it calls time erosion. Stuff that sounds totally impossible.
Right, so our goal here is to really unpack this account, pull out the key ideas, the really startling bits, and try to get our heads around the picture it paints this world where time itself is, well, breaking down.
Yeah, just think about that for a sec. Not just your watch being wrong, but the actual flow of time, cause and effect, starting to fray. That's the setup.
Okay, let's dive in. The source starts with something called the wrinkling. What exactly was that?
So according to the text, the wrinkling was like the first symptom. These localized distortions started appearing, places where time literally just, well, it came undone, like a fabric tearing, I guess.
And it gives a really specific, pretty terrifying example right off the bat, Maris City.
Mara City, yeah. Described as this big, busy city right on the coast. Apparently one morning, the skyline just started to shimmer like heat haze. But then, boom, half the city aged 200 years.
Well, hang on. 200 years? Overnight?
Instantly. That's what the text claims. It describes buildings just crumbling, metal rusting away to nothing, concrete cracking, skyscrapers collapsing, and streets instantly covered in, like, decades of vegetation growth.
That's hard to picture.
Yeah.
But the scariest part of that description, the people, what happened to them?
Yeah, the text is very blunt about that. Anyone caught in that zone?
Yeah.
They just vanished.
Poof.
No bodies, no remains, nothing. Just this district suddenly aged by centuries, empty except for ruins. Maris City became the first quarantine zone, a time scar, they called it.
Okay, so something that huge happens. The world needs answers. The source brings in Dr. Lena Corwin.
Uh-huh, Dr. Corwin. She had apparently been warning about something similar for years, publishing about temporal field stress.
But her work wasn't taken seriously. The text uses a pretty sharp phrase for it.
It does. It says her research was often just dismissed as entropy fan fiction. Basically, people thought her ideas about physics breaking down were just wild speculation, not real science.
Ouch. But Maris City must have flipped that script entirely.
Oh, absolutely. Suddenly, this ignored scientist was the only one with any kind of theory. The media latched onto the name Time Erosion, and Dr. Corwin became this, well, this reluctant expert everyone turned to.
So the source mentions she presented at a global temporal summit. What was her explanation?
Well, according to the text, her theory was deeply disturbing. She ruled out all the usual suspects, not space warping, not a black hole, not gravity doing weird things. She said time itself was decaying. The actual structure holding moments together was just unraveling.
Didn't she have an analogy for that? Something quite vivid.
Yeah, she did. She compared it to dry rot. You don't see the damage inside the walls until the whole structure just gives way. And the text is clear. This wasn't just Maris City. Time started getting thin everywhere, globally.
And the examples of that are just as strange. Clocks going haywire, neighborhoods flickering between different times.
Exactly. The text gives these snapshots.
Yeah.
Like a whole chunk of Singapore aging rapidly. Paris metro stations suddenly looking like they did in the 1940s, wartime graffiti and all. And maybe the weirdest one, this ancient Mayan temple just regrowing right in the middle of modern Mexico City, pushing buildings aside. Time was literally peeling away.
That idea is terrifying, a fundamental breakdown. So what did the world do?
Well, the text describes this massive global response. They set up the Chrono-Containment Authority.
Yeah.
Dr. Corwin became the chief temporal scientist, and they formed these special units, the Temporal Rangers.
Okay, temporal rangers, trained to go into these messed up time zones. What was their job?
Basically, yeah. Super dangerous work. Go in, investigate, document, try to pull out anyone trapped near the edges if possible, and, well, mostly just try to survive the temporal chaos themselves.
The source mentions one ranger specifically, Commander Elias Vance, the Ghost Walker. Sounds ominous.
Uh-huh. Because he was one of the first people to go deep into a collapse zone and actually come back. And the things he saw, according to the text, just horrifying. People frozen solid in time, streets running in reverse, seeing kids age into dust right before his eyes. But he also noticed something really important.
What was that?
He started realizing that their presence, people from stable time going into these zones, actually seemed to make the collapse worse, faster. Like trying to fix it was breaking it even more.
Which leads them, I guess, to look for the source, Lena's idea about an epicenter. They head to Chicago.
Right, what used to be the Chicago Loop. The text paints it as this total wasteland where the skyline itself was just flickering.
Yeah.
Modern buildings 1 second, then empty plains, then old architecture, like history stuck on a broken playback loop. Elias's chronovisor, the gadget meant to track time, was just going haywire.
Showing how bad the decay was there.
Oh yeah. His readings showed, like, a city block aging 50 years in less than 30 seconds.
Huh.
Going in was incredibly risky. You could literally just age out of existence, be completely out of sync.
But Lena thought there was a pattern.
Oh.
That it wasn't random, it was spiraling towards something that could potentially stop.
That was her big theory, yeah. That's what drove them. They had the visors and these things called chrono anchors supposed to tether them to their own time, like a safety line. But the text really emphasizes the danger, the sheer gamble of it all.
So they go into the spiral, into the heart of the Chicago zone. What was that like?
The source describes it as just chaos. Moving through streets, flickering between eras, horse-drawn carriages 1 minute, then these weird futuristic vehicles the next. Just glimpses of different timelines all smashed together. And Lena's tracking device was pulsing faster and faster as they got closer to the center.
And right at the core, they found this scar.
Yeah, not like a hole in the ground, but a hole in time. A vortex, this churning mess of collapsing eras, buildings forming and crumbling in seconds, history just eating itself.
Yeah.
And standing right there, on the edge, totally untouched by it all, was a person.
And this is where the story just takes a wild turn.
Completely mind-bending, yeah. The figure turns. And it's Elias. But older. Much older. Wearing a worn-out Temporal Ranger suit, clearly trapped there for a long, long time. Weathered, his voice sounding old.
What did this older Elias have to say?
First thing, you shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Just flat out. Lena, always a scientist, apparently starts analyzing him, calls him a divergence, a splintered version caught in the loop. Older Elias basically confirms he was one of the first Rangers there, tried to stop it, failed, got stuck.
And then he drops the big one, the truth about time erosion, according to him.
Yeah, this is the real gut punch in the text. Older Elias says, look, it's not local, it's not a disease, it's time's natural death. Entropy, but for sequence itself. Causality just ending. He says there's no future, no past anymore, just collapse.
And he gives a reason why it's happening now?
He blames humanity or our technology. Things like chrono travel, temporal shielding, stasis field, all this tech that he says bent time. They stretched the thread too thin, and now, snap.
Wow. So Lena asks the obvious question. Even then, can it be reversed?
And his answer, according to the text, just a flat, there isn't. And to prove his point, he takes off his own chrono anchor, and it just crumbles to dust. He's totally untethered. Then he points to the scar, the vortex, and said there's only one thing left to do. Go through.
Elias's reaction must have been.
Exactly what you'd think. That's suicide.
But the older Elias
Just gives this sad smile, apparently, and says, no, it's home. And then he just steps into the vortex and disappears. A really bleak, powerful moment.
Even after that, Lena comes up with another plan. Not fixing things, but something else.
Right. Faced with the absolute end of their timeline, she reveals this secret project she had. A temporal stabilizer. Her idea wasn't about repair. It was about escape. Finding the next stable sequence.
Jumping past the erosion somehow.
That's the concept, yeah. The text explains her thinking. The collapse is eating the timeline from the inside out. So maybe, just maybe, there's stable time further down the line ahead of the decay that they could jump to.
Sounds like a 1 in a million shot. The text points out the risk.
Oh, yeah. It explicitly says, no guarantee we make it. But like Elias says at that point, after seeing everything, there never was. So they decide, lock the anchors, fire up the stabilizer, and just run into the vortex.
And what happens when they come out the other side?
The text describes the transition as pure agony, pain, senses all scrambled, feeling centuries whip past, then suddenly silence, stillness. They find themselves collapsed on soft ground, but the world is utterly alien.
Different sky, 2 moons, violet light, strange buildings, weird plants.
Exactly. But the key thing, the sign, it worked. Time feels stable. Their chrono anchors sync up. They actually outran the collapse. For now, anyway, as the text notes.
And then they see people or things approaching.
Figures, yeah. Humanoid, the text says, but not quite human. And Lena's thought just sums it all up. Maybe this is the next world, the next history. The section ends with them getting up and walking toward these unknown beings.
That final image described before the epilogue is quite something.
It really is. Looking back, they see the sky behind them start to shimmer and distort. Their old timeline literally disintegrating behind them, just like older Elias said. But ahead, this new, stable, completely unknown reality, a new beginning.
And then there's the epilogue. A final kind of haunting look back.
Yeah, it jumps scene completely to some forgotten bunker, probably from the old chrono containment days. Inside, a recorded message from Lena Corwin is just playing on a loop.
What's her message?
It's a warning. Seems like it was meant for anyone left behind. She says something like, if you're hearing this, time is gone, the sequence is fractured, but life might find new threads. Seek stability, seek survivors.
And the very last bit of the text leaves us hanging, doesn't it? Builds on that message.
Right, the monitor goes dead. But the text notes that deep in the bunker ruins, there are still these faint pulses of chrono energy, echoes of the old timeline, refusing to completely fade. The last line is something like, some histories wait to be found.
Wow. What an absolutely incredible and honestly pretty unsettling journey this text describes. From those first little wrinkles to realizing the whole structure of time is falling apart, maybe because of what we did.
Yeah, he paints this picture where the fundamental rules just stop working. And the
Yeah.
only way out isn't fixing it, it's literally jumping timelines, abandoning ship.
And it definitely leaves you, the reader, thinking about those last lines from the epilogue. What are those leftover chrono energy pulses? Just background noise or something more? Who are the survivors Lena talked about? Were there others who made the jump or people left behind somehow? And what histories could possibly still be waiting out there in the ruins of a timeline that basically died?
It certainly makes you think about how fragile everything is. Even time itself really makes you wonder.